All right, kids, welcome back. We are back up in it. Talking about software still. I didn't get nearly as far as I wanted to last week, so we're going to move pretty quickly this week. Jump right on in. Everything's still the same, we're not going to have any homework. You just need to take notes, look at the resources that I give you on Blackboard, and make sure you know the things that I'm talking about. Do some research on your own. We're gonna have a test in the last week. So we talked about Photoshop last time. We talked about color modes and Photoshop being a pixel-based editing software, image editing. Basically means, and it's called raster, and that's photos basically. Any type of pixel-based image, photography, whatever it might be. We talked about resolution for print, 300 dpi, for web, 72 dpi. We talked about grayscale, RGB, CMYK, and which one is for which purpose. We talked a little bit about what you can do in Photoshop, how it works with layers and masks and opacity and filters and all the other stuff. So, moving on to Illustrator. And Photoshop and Illustrator, as I said, are both kind of image editing programs. And then InDesign is, those three are kind of for, print design or, Photoshop and Illustrator, you create content. InDesign, you kind of bring all the content together. And those are the three main design programs. Then there's web design programs and some other things. Quark also we'll talk about a little bit. But anyway, Illustrator is a vector-based image editing program or illustration program, not necessarily image editing. And that, Photoshop is pixel-based, Illustrator is vector-based. That's the main difference. And vector-based just means it's mathematical equations that decide, that create curved lines and gradients and all these different things. But it's a very crisp line. There's no pixels involved, and that is really important for one big reason, and that is an Illustrator file or a vector file you can blow up, 3,000 times its original size, and it's not going to lose an ounce of quality. It's still, you can zoom in, zoom in 1,000% on it, and it's still going to be these crisp edges and sweeping curves and everything that you've created in your illustration. And that is the real power in vector design. Let's see, Illustrator is mainly used, at least in my experience, it's mainly used for logo design. If you're a graphic designer, that's pretty much the only time I use it. There are other applications for it, for actual illustrations, if you're an illustrator, and also for designing fonts. We'll talk about that a little bit. But the main thing I use it for anyway is logo design. And that's because it allows you to specify certain colors called spot colors. And what that means, we're going to talk about that more once we get into print processes, but spot colors are specially mixed inks that are always the same color. There's like a number associated. The Pantone matching system, I don't know if you've heard of that. PMS for short, not the kind you're thinking of. But the Pantone matching system is, these specially mixed colors that are going to be the same no matter where you go, because they're all, they're all the same color. If you have PMS 782, it's going to be that same color no matter who prints it and all that, which is important because if you just create stuff in 4-color process, which is CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and that's just 4 inks that are mixed together to create all these different colors, then there's always variables. It's not going to look like what you have on screen when it goes to print. The printer might have a different color space, or just might be an old press. It's not going to be accurate. So these Pantone inks or spot colors allow you to have control over your colors and make sure that it's reproducing the same color no matter where it might be, where it's printing, who's printing it, what the document is. And that's used a lot in Illustrator. In Photoshop, you can do that, but it's not nearly as versatile as in Illustrator. Illustrator, you can select an unlimited amount of spot colors and organize them the way you want to. And that comes in really handy when you're designing a logo, because That way you know that your brand identity is going to be consistent. You know that that color is going to be the same color no matter if it's, you know, printed here or printed in China. It's going to be that same exact color. And most businesses and most organizations have set spot colors for their identity. For example, University of Kentucky, that UK blue, I forget the number, it's PMS 280s, I don't know, I can't remember. But you can find it on their website. It'll tell you what spot color to use. But that blue is a very specific blue, and that has to be used on all of their their collateral, whether it's a brochure or the website, whatever it might be. That's that very specific blue that they use. So Illustrator is great for logos because it's vector based. You can, it makes the logo much more versatile. You can put it at the bottom of an ad in a magazine, or you can blow it up to 20 feet wide and put it on a billboard or the front of a cruise ship, whatever it might be. You can blow it up as big as you want to. It's never going to lose quality. You can also have spot colors, which ensures consistent color reproduction. Also, if you really get into Illustrator, I'm more of a layout kind of guy. But if you are interested in illustration, Illustrator is a very powerful tool. I mean, to be honest, I probably only know 20% of what Illustrator can actually do, just because I've never had to delve that far into it. I learned how to do the things I needed to do, and that was that was it. But we're always, graphic designers are always learning. It's not like an accountant where you can you learn math and it's the same the whole time. You can only get to a certain point. Graphic designers, things are constantly changing, so you're constantly learning and trying to kind of go with the flow or go against the flow if that's what you're trying to do. But anyway. So Illustrator, you can also do all these very cool illustrations. They're going to be very clean and sharp, much more so than if you drew it with like ink and paper, because it's digital and you can blow it up however many times you want to. And you can also do a lot of really neat things with illustration. And there's something called gradient maps in Illustrator, and what that allows you to do is create these very precise gradients, whereas like in Photoshop and other programs, a gradient's either going to be a radial gradient that goes from like a lighter color to a darker color, or whatever, or a linear gradient where it goes from a lighter color down to a darker color instead of sunburst out. And there's really not much else. Illustrator, well, you have these gradient maps, which basically this sort of this grid comes on top of whatever you're creating, and you can adjust this grid to get very precise light areas and dark areas to create reflections, or looks like that something's rippling off the water. It's easier to see. So look at the examples. I'm going to have some examples of what you can do with Illustrator illustration using these gradient maps and a pen tool, basically drawing. That's really cool. You can do a lot. I said with Illustrator, you can also use it for font design, and that's actually how Illustrator I think was first developed. Adobe wanted to kind of make some money off their font design software, so they created Illustrator. I think, and it had something to do with that. But fonts are always vector based, and that's because unless you do them in Photoshop and then flatten it and save it as a JPEG or whatever. Then they become raster based, and then you blow them up and they're going to get blurry. You won't be able to read them. In Illustrator, though, and InDesign and Word and all these programs, they are vector based. Fonts are, because they need to be easily readable, whether they're at 5-point type or 372-point type. 8-foot tall type. It can't be blurry. It still needs to be sharp and crisp and all that. So Illustrator is great for designing fonts, which is a whole profession in itself. We talked about typography and how important that is. Creating fonts, if that's your specialty, I mean, you can make a lot of money. I was looking for a font the other day, Accidens Grotesque. It's kind of a classic sans serif font, and I saw somebody that used it, and I wanted it, and so I was looking for it. And there are some sites where you can get free fonts, but if you create good fonts that become popular, Accidens Grotesque is $900 to buy the font.